All right, everyone. So I have a wonderful guest here. I want to welcome Heather here on Run, Thrive, Survive. Heather, what? Hold on, let me try that again. I'm
You did
sharing my
this
words.
too.
All right, you ready?
Yeah.
All right, guys. So I have a wonderful guest here today. Heather is on with us. I want to welcome Heather to Run, Thrive, Survive. Heather, how are you doing today?
I'm so great. I am so excited to be with a whole bunch of serial runner people.
Oh, yeah.
I you said before, it's not always people who are like athletic runners who do races and stuff. And I felt this is my community because I don't do any, you know, I don't really consider myself like athletic even. Like I just love to run for my own mental health and I just enjoy it for some random reason. So I'm excited to talk to your people because they're my people too.
No, these are the best types of people to be around because we're the ones that are like, well, we don't have to be that, 5:56 a mile to say, oh, we're a runner. No, we run. We run from problems. We run from our thoughts. We run from our feelings, and sometimes we run from our job if we really have to. We are true runners here on the podcast. So I want to open up the discussion because we've got a really awesome discussion ahead of us, and it's really going to be focused on generality of anxiety and that it's okay to be anxious and it's okay to say that you have anxiety. I think there is a really awful stigma going around that if you have anxiety, and correct me if I'm wrong, maybe you think differently. We've kind of grouped anxiety into these millennials where they're like, oh, they're too anxious to do their test. They're too anxious to do this. And people have stopped wanting to admit they have anxiety. So they've stopped wanting to try to cope with it in appropriate ways. And I just want to get your take on this. Like, how do you see this idea, not idea of anxiety, like it's a real thing. We're all dealing with it. What do you feel it has kind of become in today's world?
Sure. So I think we don't really know what it is and that there must be something that needs to be fixed. And sometimes there is some big underlying issues that need to be addressed. But I think generalized anxiety is a very normal process. And what it is it's just an invitation to unlock something inside of you or give you a clue that maybe you need to slow down a little bit or take a break or there's something trying to get out of you. Maybe you feel stuck. And so, kind of viewing it as an invitation to tap into another side of yourself. I know it sounds kind of weird, but seeing anxiety as a gift, you know what I mean? Like it's trying to give you clues that there's something here to pay attention to. And I don't know about you, but I'm a very stubborn, type A, driven, go getter, like knock all the walls down, suffer all the way through type person. And that can you tell why I'm anxious? And
Right.
anxiety has been just a little light that goes off that says, hey, like, listen, there's something more here for you. And do you trust that if you slow down and take the time to take care of yourself, that there's some solutions here, there's some ideas, there's some creativity, there's something to unlock within you. And so anxiety is really a gift there. It's seen as a curse, and I know it can be really really hard. And I've dealt with it on a spectrum from, oh man, I need to go outside and do a couple mile run or whatever, all the way to I can't sleep at night and I have pain in my chest and I'm really like struggling. And so there's it can be very very hard, and I don't want to minimize it, but it's also too, it's there for a reason. It's not there because there's something wrong with you. It's there to tell you something. And I think we have an invitation to open ourselves up and listen to what source, universe, intuition is trying to say. And I think I've become more spiritual since I've become more anxious.
That's a really interesting point that you brought up there. That it's a light that goes on to kind of tell us that maybe something needs to be done about something. Because
Yeah.
that's kind of how I've always seen it. Where I mean, there's times where I feel like we deal with what we call crippling anxiety, right? Where we just feel like we're just so overwhelmed and it's never going to end. But there are other times where it comes up in certain situations. And sometimes we may not be able to pinpoint in that situation what's making us anxious, other than that light is going off telling us, hey, you need to focus your attention somewhere else. Like there's something going on that, it's trying to tell us something. And I think in a way, if we were to look at it that way, we could really turn anxiety into more of a superpower, right?
A
Where
100%.
you know something that you need to change on it. But at the same time, there are times where people deal with crippling anxiety. Now, I want to bring up a really interesting statistic. And something that, we feel alone in when we are anxious, but we're not. And I'm going to bring up a statistic. And anxiety affects about 40 million adults ages 18 or older.
Mhm.
What do you think is the most prevalent way that people are starting to deal with anxiety in society that we're starting to see?
Yeah, well, I think there's two different ways to deal with it, or that's common to deal with it, is
Yeah.
completely fight it and push it away and struggle with it, which if you know anything about psychology and what really causes issues within our psyche, it is resistance, period. So when something hurts, when something is hard, we say, no, it's not. I'm going to fight through this and push it and ignore it. And what that causes is strain. I just went to the dentist, I told you, and they said that my gums were irritated because they weren't healing. What needed to be healed didn't have the space and the air and the place to heal. And so it started swelling and become more irritated. And I feel like that's what's happening within us emotionally and spiritually, is we're not giving ourselves the space and the time to heal. And we're just going ahead and chewing the food anyway and acting like everything's normal. And what that causes is mental inflammation and more struggle and more pain. And so, as a society, our resistance to it is actually prolonging it and making it harder. And the other way that we're, tempted to deal with it is through more unhealthy coping mechanisms, running to things that aren't good for us, whether it be like substance abuse or, you know, just not taking care of ourselves in general. Uh, we're holistic beings. I think that's what just completely blows my mind about the way that we were created, is everything touches each other. And we've got to take, I always hashtag mental health whenever I go running. And that's because I believe wholeheartedly that my physical health is tied to my mental, spiritual, and emotional health, and vice versa. And we can't neglect all these parts of ourselves. If you're dealing with anxiety or some other mental health issue, I mean, if you can't bring yourself to go to therapy or deal with some of the trauma that you've dealt with. I know this sounds weird, but start drinking more water. Start going outside into the sun a little bit more. Put your feet barefoot on the dirt and the ground and connect with earth a little bit. Like, we don't always have to headbutt into our problem to heal it. We just need to start taking care of our bodies and our spirits as a whole, and it will help, right?
Absolutely. It's those key habits that, I mean, it's not even just the habits. I was even listening this morning, Atomic Habits. If you haven't read it, it's an
Mhm.
awesome book
Yes.
to read. But they just had a short, like it was like literally a 3 or 4 sentences. Said so many studies have shown that if you start to exercise, and they didn't say how long, they didn't say how often, they just said if you start any type of exercise, you guys, this could be gardening. I talk about gardening a lot like it's a joke, but it's not a joke. It literally is hard work. Anything active, you start to change all these other aspects in your life. And it's because
Absolutely.
when you can establish one thing, it just kind of supersedes everything else. And that's the type of change that you want to see, something that leads to other changes without your mind really having to establish that you have to change all of these things.
Amen.
Now, I love that you said you can't bundle anxiety up. And you also talked about running. How do you feel that running is not a cure, but a way to be healthy when it comes to coping with anxiety? Because I try to push this point all the time. How
Yeah.
do you feel different? How does it make you feel as a runner and as somebody that does have anxiety who needs to be able to cope with it?
I've never thought about it this way, but this image just popped in my head of like when you're ironing something with a lot of wrinkles and how just the heat kind of pushes those wrinkles out. I feel like that's happening to my spirit when I run. Like, I have all of these, I don't know, it feels like the way I've experienced anxiety before is like just my chest is just so tight. It's like I can hardly breathe, and like my mind is just racing, and I just feel almost kind of overtaken by something. And it's interesting when I go out and run, it's literally like the literal sweat and the literal act of my heart, starting to kind of get into this rhythm. And it's just this very weird spiritual experience where it's like physically I'm starting to iron out all those wrinkles within myself. And it's like you're physically exerting yourself out and there's nothing left for you. And you get to the very end and you realize you're okay, and there's something too just about being outside where you're connected and you're like, God, you are so much bigger than all of this. Like everything that I think is just like going to completely destroy my world. Like you hold it all in the palm of your hand and look at these trees and look at the grass and look at the sky. And, it says like, do they worry? Right? There's time and seasons for them and they grow and they develop. And um, it's such a beautiful world out there. And I'm so in the habit and the trap of completely blocking out the world and the earth and remembering that I belong there first,
Yeah.
not in here with all these awesome lights and awesome technology. And I love all this stuff, but this is what we were created for. And so it is an incredibly spiritual experience for me. And what's interesting too is, I love this saying that you can't create unless you feel safe. And I feel like I'm a very creative person and I would create for a living, really. And it's like with the anxiety, there's no feeling of safety there. And so when you go out and you run, it's interesting. And I iron out all those wrinkles and I beat everything out of me and I'm left empty. It's like creativity is able to move within me. And I've had some of the most life changing ideas that come to me in a run. I don't know if you've experienced that where just something just pops to you. And I know it's us creating the space for something to step in and speak to us, or we're not able to hear it when we're in all the busyness and the grind. So I can honestly say running has like changed my life and it's an essential part of my life right now from a mental and spiritual perspective.
I absolutely love that. I always say like running is like it's that time of day where our thoughts are able to or we're able to catch up with our thoughts. I mean,
Mhm.
when you have anxiety and everybody listening to this that's had anxiety can relate to one point or another. When you're anxious, your mind is going 100 miles per hour. And I don't know about you, but there's usually alarm bells going off and it's just hard to think, it's hard to understand and I just don't know where it's going. But when you run, it's like the alarms go off. They just stop. They hold on. They stop sounding, and
Yeah.
we're able to like actually catch up and understand what your mind is trying to say. Now, I have to ask you
Mhm.
this because I always imagine this. How have you ever? And I'm not sure. Where do you live? Do you live?
Georgia. I
Oh,
live in Augusta, Georgia. Mhm.
ooh, okay. So, have you ever stood? It could be next to anywhere, somewhere beautiful in nature. I usually say the mountains or the beach because that's what I'm super familiar with. And just imagine how small your problems actually are
Oh,
when
I
you're
know
sitting
it.
there like that.
I know it. Yeah, I actually just got a tattoo a couple weeks ago. I was on the beach and got a little tattoo of a wave on my foot because every time I stand at the edge of the ocean, I remember exactly what you just said that there's something so much greater than me and I'm a part of something so much bigger and I'm okay. And I think that's a really important affirmation to say to yourself is I'm safe, I belong, I'm okay, and just really grounding yourself in that over it, especially for people who deal with anxiety. And so I got that tattoo on my foot because I wanted to remember that no matter where I stand, to remember that, right? Even, not just at the ocean. But yeah, I love it.
No, I think it's the most powerful thing to be reminding yourself and just yeah, small affirmations. I'm okay because sometimes that's so hard to admit. We're
Yes.
so fast at admitting I'm not okay. Everything's not really fine, but
Yeah.
we're so slow to saying, you know what? It could be worse.
Hmm.
It could actually be a lot worse, but it's not. We're okay. We still
Yep.
have our lives and everything's not on fire. I don't know if
Hmm.
every time I think of anxiety, I don't know about you. You know that meme where this guy is just sitting there and the entire room is on fire and the caption just says, "I'm fine. Everything's
Yeah.
fine." I think that's what we all feel like we're living in right now with the pandemic or with this past pandemic. I don't know if we're still in the
Yeah.
pandemic, if it's over. I don't really know where we stand with the pandemic anymore, but that's how the world feels. We're just like, I'm fine, everything's fine. And we're at this point where we're just like ignoring everything. How do
Yeah.
you think the pandemic has really affected people with anxiety? Have you seen a change? Do you think have you felt a change? How have you coped through it?
Um, I don't think that it has really changed anything. I think it's brought to surface things. And again, I'm working right now with my own therapist to he always says, be curious, be curious. And so when something comes up, instead of like saying, okay, this is a problem, this is a struggle, how can we become curious about this and see that there's an opportunity? And I think there's been such an opportunity for people to get more aware of their own humanness and their own limits and realize that the way that we've been operating hasn't been enough and that there's so much more soul and spirit in us than I think we like or want to
Right.
address or allow space
Really
for.
true.
And so for me, I just think the older I'm getting more hippie and more weird, but like I just, really appreciating my environment and wanting to create physical space around me and time space for transitions and not just feeling like I'm on a conveyor belt all the time. Um,
So hard to
it's been,
do.
yeah, yeah. What about you?
No, I would say, well, I guess I forgot what my original question is, but going off of what
The
you're,
pandemic, like,
oh,
has it increased anxiety or what is it?
so, to be completely honest with you, I would say yes and no. I would say it increased my awareness to my anxiety because prior to the
Exactly.
pandemic, I think it was like, this sounds awful, but functioning alcoholics. I feel like
Yep.
I was a functioning anxious person. And
Oh, yeah.
where I had a lot of anxiety. I mean, I could look back and I could see my habits. I could see, me burning out with just work, just burying myself in the work, pretending like these problems do not exist. Like I put blinders on thinking, well, if I don't see them, I don't deal with them. Right. And that's where a lot of people I think were prior to this pandemic. And then when everything stopped, when everything you worked on stopped, and for a lot of us, we lost a lot of our identity because things were taken away from us. That's when the anxiety started to show because we didn't have the same ways to cope with it. We didn't have these same like just coping mechanisms to just get through without actually addressing the problem. When we had to stop, we had to address the problem, plus the idea that there's a pandemic going on and nobody's really experienced the pandemic. Like, we don't really know what this is. And so, all of that combined, I think it brought out anxiety, but I don't think it really increased it. I think it just showed us we're not okay, but we're going to be okay. We're going to be okay, but we just
Right.
have to like actually address the problem. And I'm
Right.
not sure if for you, loss of identity, loss of self-confidence is a really big factor when it comes to anxiety.
Sure. Sure. Well, and two, realizing, I think with the identity piece that it doesn't, it's not an indicator of anything with who you are. There's no part of it that is a property to your identity at all. Again, reframing it to see it as a helpmate that is there to shine a light on something that you can dig in deeper to elevate yourself, but it's not a part of who you are. I don't believe that. I think we are so much greater and more capable than we give ourselves permission to be, and it has nothing to do with our accomplishments or what we got done that day or didn't get done that day. It's
Mhm.
just our natural state.
How,
Our natural state is great.
how do you see society kind of arranging anxiety? Because like you said, we start to label ourselves. A lot of people have literally labeled themselves, I'm an anxious person. I have
Mhm.
anxiety instead of I'm like dealing with anxiety instead of maybe, like there's just things that I have to deal with. People have started labeling themselves. How do you think we got there, and should we stay here? What do you think about that?
I think what matters the most is how you feel about you. I know sometimes language is an interesting thing because it means different things to different people. Like I talk about anxiety all the time. Like I got some anxiety, man, my anxiety, blah blah blah. But I'm very detached from it. Like I don't have any problem talking about it. I'm very very open with it. I'm almost proud of it because I feel like it's a great connector. I like being able to connect with people on that because that's like, oh, I feel you, I see you, I completely understand. I deal with that too. And so I see it as somewhat of a gift, you know? Um, but I think you need to be careful if you do have a tendency or a history to really be hard on yourself and to really struggle with self esteem and an identity, to be really mindful of the words that you use and how you speak over yourself. And again, you're the only thermometer with that. There's no right or wrong with this. I think a good just indication is how do you feel when you talk about yourself? How do you feel when you talk about your anxiety? Do you feel shame? Do you feel embarrassment? What does it mean to you? And make adjustments based off of that because what may be right for me may not be right for you. And you're your own best judge and you've got to trust yourself.
Absolutely. How did you start realizing or becoming okay with yourself and anxiety? Because a lot of us run from it at first. Were you always okay with it, or was it something that you had to work with?
Yeah, I was really lucky with anxiety specifically that I didn't start dealing with that until I had graduated with a degree in counseling. So
Oh, that's
I
fun. That's ironic. That's too
it's
ironic.
well, it's weird as we were studying anxiety to become therapists and I'm like, "Oh, I didn't have any relation to it. I didn't understand. Like I read the symptoms, understood it like cognitively,
Right.
but never had experienced it." When I started dealing with anxiety was when I quit my career and went into the online space to build my own business. And then I started having like panic attacks and all this stuff. And I'm like,
Mm.
oh, that's what they were talking about. Right. But it's kind of cool because I realized, wow, anxiety is coming here with me because I'm being brave and doing something that I want to do with my life. And I'm crossing boundaries that I never thought I'd be able to cross before. And so it's accompanying me, like, not, I'm not happy about it, but it's accompanying me kind of saying, like, hey, you're really pushing yourself and you're doing something awesome and brave, right? And so and that's a reframe that's very, very intentional. But it didn't happen till later on in my life. But I will say, I know this isn't what we're talking about. I think confidence has been my demon my whole life. And so I'm being very optimistic about anxiety, but let me be very clear that my demon has always been the confidence issue and identity. And that's something that's been way harder for me to deal with. So maybe anxiety is hard for you to deal with, but we all have our thing. I promise you, we all have our thing.
So let me ask you the hard question. How are you dealing with that demon? Because I think honestly, I have that same demon. Anxiety creeps up, but man, low self confidence, trying to keep it high, like on
Yeah.
a regular basis, seems nearly impossible, but it has to be done. So how do you deal with it?
Dude, it's so crazy because I will feel so confident and good about myself, and then boom, it's like this massive self doubt.
Out
So
of
like
nowhere.
out
Out
of
of nowhere.
nowhere,
I get
out
it.
of nowhere, out of nowhere. So like this past weekend, I went and I spoke at a conference, and I was so excited about it. And right when it was over, I just felt horrible about myself. Like all this weird narratives. And it was so crazy. It's what I was talking about on stage. I immediately started dealing with. And I'm like, what the hell? But I called my coach right afterwards and I'm like, I just massively got hit with this wave of um like self-doubt and I feel so weird. I should be really happy. I just did something that was incredible and the biggest audience I've ever spoken in front of. Why do I feel so bad? And, one of the things that he's been working with me on, and again, I'm a big proponent of have somebody that can ground you and talk to you, whether it is a therapist, whether it's a coach or somebody who can just you trust spiritually and emotionally to kind of bring you back to center, and a professional, somebody who does
Yeah.
this with their life. Please,
Yes.
seek that out. Friends are great, but there's a big difference between a friend who loves you and like a coach or a therapist or a mentor you're paying and giving some money to, and them just being like because they'll be honest with you, right? And he just told me, he said, "Do you know, Heather, you're robbing yourself of the most incredible experience right now that you could be feeling. Like this fear's coming in to rob you of what could be just the most incredible moment." And seeing this doubt and this fear as this tangible thing that you can either accept or you can tangibly see, notice, appreciate, and choose to let it go on by you, has been really freeing for me. Not easy, but
Right.
freeing to understand that when this comes on me, I don't have to pull it into me. I can literally notice it as this separate thing and decide and choose to walk away from it. And it's not easy. Like, so when that was over with, I've been working a lot on visualization and like, okay, I'm going to picture the rest of this day going so much better. I'm going to picture myself smiling and laughing and feeling good about this talk and all of this stuff. And that's what I did. And guess what happened? It did. I started feeling, because he always says,
Yeah.
in order to become, you've got to be. And so if I want to feel good about myself, I've got to adopt that identity right now and picture myself feeling good about myself. What would Heather, who's confident, how would she move in this world right now? What would she wear? How would she sit up? How would she smile? What would she do? And actually start taking those action steps based off that future Heather. And you notice that future Heather or future you is not as far off as you think. It's an
That
illusion. It's an illusion. It's a
that
mind game.
No, it really, that visualization technique that you just described is
Mhm.
so powerful. It is so
Mhm.
powerful. I've always loved, like, lived by the quote, if you can't see it, you can't achieve it. Like, you
Yeah.
have to be able to see yourself doing something before you're able to set yourself out to do it. Now, a lot of us
100%.
go after things where we're like, I can't even imagine this happening. Well, you don't have to have it in detail, but you just have to be able to visualize yourself in that situation like you just did. And a
Yes.
lot of this is like, I'm sure you've heard law of attraction. Do you implement that a lot? Is that something you like to go by, or is that something that, hey, it's there, but I don't know about that one?
I am all about some law of attraction and manifesting and
Yes.
all that. 100%. Um, I do almost daily. It's not perfect, but almost
Love
daily.
it.
Big, long guided meditations off abundance and bringing things into your life. And 100%. I mean, that is the work. That is the work. That's the work that we've got to get into. And I mean, I studied mental health therapy, and I'm going to tell you,
Great.
I don't believe talk therapy is enough. Like it has its place, but I think that there's a spiritual element to it and a mental element that we have got to tap into, of like our subconscious and tapping into
Right.
all that is available for us spiritually and energetically. I could go on for 50 years about that, but I think a really good place to start is just to start viewing yourself as a creator, and that you're co-creating this life with what I believe is God. And you can say whatever, universe, whatever, there's
Right.
a co-creation there. But, I grew up in a very religious environment where there was a creator and you. And I've really come to believe that no, we are co-creators, that we are creating our lives as well. And we have equal say in this. And the power of that is so freaking amazing that I can literally bring into existence what I desire. I
I
can.
I love that. And I love that you brought in there's a co-creator, because a lot of the times when we talk about this, it's kind of a fine line, right? Where everybody will
Mhm.
believe what they need to. And honestly, I don't see anything wrong with what anybody believes. I personally do. I believe God's my co-creator with me. And
Yeah,
honestly,
right.
when you have something bigger than yourself to believe in, the power that it brings to you, that it's not, it almost lifts things off your shoulders where you have a guide. And I'm not sure how to put that in more powerful words than just saying you're not alone on this journey that may feel so lonely.
Oh,
And
man,
right
amen.
there, it's just like a key step up on everything that you do.
And
So
that
powerful.
and that God, that source, that guide is for you and not
Absolutely.
against you, and that's something that I've really had to rewire because my upbringing was like, harshness and struggle and striving. And I think that's where too a lot of the anxiety can come from, because you feel like it's a checklist and a check mark and something that you have to accomplish, when love is here and now and irregardless and unconditional and available no matter what. And source God is seeking after you and wanting you to flourish and come into your fullness more than you do. And so, universe is on my side. Everything is conspiring in my favor. And saying those things over and over and over again to yourself is everything, because it grounds you and helps you realize, to our point earlier, that you're safe, you belong, and things are working in your favor and going to come together.
Absolutely. And for people also listening to this, I always saw it in a way when there's obstacles and man, do things fall apart sometimes and man, do things get in your way. You see more purpose when you have that co-creator with you, where it's like maybe it's a test, maybe it's like, hey, I've got to build this strength before I get to the next level. It really puts you in a whole different mindset, and it really just it opens so many doors. Now
Amen.
I want to ask you something, because I talk a lot about meditation on the podcast, and I've actually had a lot of different people talk about the way they meditate, because
Mhm.
not no meditation is the same. A lot of people have different methods. A lot of people have different like kind of boundaries that they go through with meditation. What does meditation look like for you?
Yeah. So I have the traditional meditation practice that you do normally in the, you know how self-help people
Yeah.
are, in the morning after you read or your journal, you go through meditation. So I've been doing that. What I'm working on is two different things. With that practice, extending it for a little longer and going a little deeper. So that's my practice there. I have a guided one from Joe Dispenza that I use around abundance, and it's wacky and nuts and weird and makes me uncomfortable, which is great. But what I wanted to mention and really lean into within the context of what we're talking about is meditation is more of a practice, integration throughout your day. So it doesn't have to be sitting down dead
Right.
silent for 10 minutes. Like, even just like
I love this.
the other day, just like I don't know if you ever, self-employed people who work and creating their own stuff. It's sometimes gets really confusing. You have to kind of bring yourself back to center and be like, okay, let's
Oh yeah.
refocus. So just putting your hand on your heart and then just closing your eyes and just taking a deep breath in and a deep breath out, and just recentering yourself for a minute, and even just putting your feet on the ground. And even if it's just for, a few seconds, and maybe even saying a mantra to yourself, like, to me, that is meditation. And I've been working imperfectly on implementing that throughout my day, few times here and there. So meditation is more of a lifestyle
Right.
as opposed to just a 30-minute guided thing that I do, which is great.
I love
But
it.
I need that throughout the day.
No, I'm right there with you. And I was gonna say earlier, and then I didn't get this the comment in because I forgot it. But if anybody's ever, if they're self-employed, if you've ever started a business, I mean, even side hustles, I can't tell you, you will never feel anxiety like you do in those situations. You will never feel, I guess, I almost want to say as lost and just like as like mind blown in everything that you touch. I
Hmm.
swear, as you will when you're in those situations. And I'm sure there's other situations, but I've said before, and I said it this morning, I could not imagine ever having this much anxiety if I were working for somebody else, because a lot of the times when you're working for someone else, it's kind of laid out for you. But when you're working for yourself, man, oh, the anxiety, I'm sometimes it's crippling. And I like to do exactly kind of like what you said, just sitting there breathing. I like to ground myself. I always like have my hands
Hmm.
touching something. I have my feet on the ground. I have like body sensory is going
Yes.
off to ground me, to say, I am here. This is the present. I'm not living in the future. I'm not living in the past. I am here and
Amen.
now, and I have to focus now. And there is
Amen.
something about that where you're just it reels you back in, it lets you refocus, and it lets that anxiety, that anxiousness inside of you calm down, because you don't get rid of it. You just calm it down.
And we don't get rid of it. That's a great point. I hope that this is encouraging to people and not
Absolutely.
discouraging, but I
Oh, yeah.
think as an entrepreneur, creator, whatever we are, we have to realize that the unknown, the thing that we're fighting against, isn't going anywhere with the lifestyle we have chosen. And we have to figure out a way to make peace and get comfortable with this type of energy and this type of chaos and this type of unknown and this type of ups and this types of downs, because that is the life that we have chosen. And again, it's realizing that we can be comfortable in chaos by grounding ourselves. And when we start to resist the chaos, what we talked about earlier, that's where the struggle starts coming in.
Absolutely. And thank you for pointing that out. I'm not discouraging anybody, but when you're in that situation, the reward, I will say this, the reward of your hard work and everything that you
Yeah.
create is way more
Yeah.
than anything you'll feel along the journey. But along that journey, it can get overwhelming, but it's okay. It's okay to not be okay, but you're also going to be okay. We should add that into that quote.
Amen.
So now, kind of coming towards the end of the podcast, what my slogan is run your life. So life doesn't run
Mm,
you.
hmm.
What are things that you make sure that you can control, that you run in your life, that allow you to keep doing, what you want, that allow to give you the freedom in your life? Are there any key aspects to that? I know we talked about meditation, that might be a huge one.
Hmm.
Is there
Hmm.
anything else?
What a great question. Non negotiables are so important to establish in your own life. What are your own personal non negotiables? Do you have them? Are they written down? Are you honoring them? That's what you're asking essentially. And so for me, non negotiables are my personal development practice. So for me, that's reading and journaling every day, meditation most days. Um, I've been working on my water intake, that I drink
Love
2
it.
of these big ol' ass bottles of water
That's
so
huge.
I can stay hydrated. Yeah, but I drink a lot of coffee, so that's why on that. That's probably why my anxiety is, like, so crazy. And, I
I'm right
actually have
there
a
with you.
non-negotiables here, sweating at some point, so getting some kind of sweat in and taking care of the way I look and feeling better. I told you earlier my confidence has always been kind of thing that I've worked with, and I've always been really down about the way that I looked in my appearance. And so I have a kind of tendency to like just want to say like F it and like put pajamas on and my hair in a bun because I work from home. But I'm like, you know what, girl, even if you're wearing your PJs, you can put on some lipstick just to feel good about yourself. And sometimes I do that. I'll just be in my jammies and my bun, my hair, but homegirl got her pink lipstick on, you know what I mean? So small things like that make me feel a little bit better about myself. And
No, I'm
so
right there with you.
yeah, those are it.
I love it. No, that last part, I said that this morning too. I'm so happy you brought that up. Somebody asked, like, where are you going? You're all dressed up. And I was like, my rule every single day is well, except on weekends, all right? I give myself a
Yeah,
break on the
yeah,
weekend.
yeah.
Every single day, because when you're a creator, when you're working for yourself, sometimes it's hard to get motivated. I wake
Oh,
up
yeah.
same time every morning and I get dressed. Like I get out of my pajamas, I do my hair, I do my makeup, regardless if I'm going to see anybody. You
Yep.
just feel good. It's that self-confidence that you're ready. You're ready to hit it
Amen.
hard and you're ready to go. So,
Amen. Amen.
well, thank you so much for coming on. I if people want to come find you, because I know you have a podcast, it's very similar, probably with the same kind of audience, a Happy Brain podcast. Where can they find
Yeah.
you?
And you're gonna be on it. I think next week
Yes,
we have you coming. I'm so excited about it.
super
And
excited.
talking about how you've used running to
Yeah,
make your brain happy. It's just a 15-minute mental health podcast
love
that's
it.
quirky and weird and to the point to hopefully give you a tip or an idea to stay mentally healthy. Because this is the thing, is we all have our thing. It might not be anxiety for you, but there's something, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's part of our humanity, and it's a beautiful connector if we really think about it. Like you and I connecting on this, like we've never really spent time together or talked, but I understand what you're saying because I've felt that too. And how cool is it that two women who've never really spent time together can be like, dude, I know, I get that. I know what it feels like. Um, it's a beautiful thing. So if we choose to look at it that way, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's a way to feel that you're not alone in this world.
Yeah,
You're not
for
alone.
sure. No, you're not. No, you're not.
Do you have social links, or where can they find you?
Oh, yeah.
Contact. No,
At
you're
at Heather Parody everywhere. You can find me anywhere.
awesome. Well, thank you again so much for
Yes, this
coming
was
on
so much
today, Heather.
fun.
We will catch up with you next week. And if you want to listen to me talk on Heather's podcast, is it live or is it going to be recorded?
It will be recorded.
Awesome. Then you will have to find me over on Happy Brain Podcast.